So Theratrak, and what was the big problem that you saw, or perhaps a number of problems that you're identifying that you thought Theratrak could really respond to?
Yeah, and it's like that. There are a number of problems. I started off the whole journey going, I need my clients or my participants to do therapy at home. That was kind of the core problem. But when you start sort of digging a bit deeper and talking to people, there's this problem, and then there's this problem, and then there's this problem. So the original problem was trying to get participants to do their home program so that they could become more independent. Because as therapists, we know that if you practice, I mean, this is always my mum, if you practice, you get better. It's the same with therapy, right? If you do your exercises, or if you do the things that your therapist has recommended or that you've worked with to build up to your goals, chances are and hope is that you will get better and you will reach your goals, right? But you've got to do it more than, once a week for 40 minutes in a therapy session. And so that was the original problem. But then the other side of it, and I guess the flip side, is looking at pediatric therapists and how they work. And in private practice here in Australia anyway, it's pretty full on. We're seeing between 6 to 10 clients a day. I see 8, so I sit in the middle of that one, of 40-minute sessions back to back. And if you sort of do the maths on time with that sort of thing, you've got about 15, 20 minutes of lunch in the middle, maybe a few minutes for admin, but there's not a lot of time. And I guess one of the nuances of being a therapist and working in the industry is how much paperwork there is to do, and it's just increasing. It gets a bit scary sometimes with the NDIA reports, with needing to know how much progress a kid's done, needing to know to write all your medical notes, needing to write the letters. There's so much stuff that goes on in the background outside of a therapy session, that time is really precious for therapists. So if I can do something quicker or do something more efficiently, or do something with Theratrak anyway, we write our home programs concurrently with a therapy session. So by the time the therapist is left, that small amount of paperwork is done and they don't have to go off and do it somewhere else. So you're saving a therapist 5 or 10 minutes, which when I talk to therapists, they're like, oh, I could have lunch. That would be amazing.
That is amazing to hear, actually. It's
it's time and compliance are probably the two big things that we're working on.
So so you've got there the reduction, too much administration for the therapist, and being able to reduce that. Any other key problems that, from a therapist point of view, that are being experienced that Theratrak responds to? One thing that sort of comes to mind is, are you addressing, for example, some of the adherence challenges, or some of the that habitual, I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce this properly, but the creating the new habits, within an individual. Is that sort of part of the transformation?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we're working towards, is figuring out where those incentives lie and what's motivating to people. Is it motivating to see how well you do in a therapy session and then your outcomes, or do you need external motivators? Everyone works a little bit differently. At the moment, we're still in that sort of early stages of figuring out what those motivators are. My key, I guess, personal interest as a therapist is I want it to be intrinsic. So I want the participants at the end of the day to go, yes, I want to log into Theratrak because I want to see how well I've done, rather than creating external, reward systems that then people rely on, going, well, I'm only going to do my therapy because I get these points or this something or whatever. But that's a hard one for people, because behavior change is really, really hard, especially when you're working on something that, you don't go to therapy to do the easy things. You go to therapy because you're doing the tricky things, right? If you're a child who's on the autism spectrum, you're trying to learn to make and keep friends, which is really hard because, I suffer with communication problems or social problems. Those sorts of things are tricky. So that's something we're working on, is in terms of what is that key motivator? I think with pediatrics, though, one of the benefits of working in pediatrics is you have parents that are highly motivated, because they want to see their kids succeed. So that's always a big, a big draw card for us. And I guess, that's probably the other part.
So you're looking at it from the therapist point of view. There's some goals there and aspirations in terms of what you as a therapist would like to help achieve as far as the participant is concerned. Talk me through what's the experience like for the participant? What are they getting with Theratrak?
Yeah, so at the moment, what they get with Theratrak, and like I said, tech's an ever evolving platform. So we started off, I guess, with Theratrak as a single discipline. So it was just an occupational therapy app that was helping participants who are accessing OT to view their home programs, so be able to see personalized content from a therapy session. So we get our therapists to take photos and videos within therapy sessions of the kids doing the activities. Because as a therapist, I believe it's not about, again, I've said this, it's not about being perfect, it's about being the best of yourself. So being a therapist and I guess using Theratrak in a session, what you'll do is you'll use our activity database, take a photo and a video of a kid doing a therapy activity. So say like a bear crawl or say a breathing activity or whatever it might be. And then you send that home with some personal prescriptive advice for the parent. So it might be, how long do I want you to do the task for? How often do I want you to do the task for? And any of those really specific strategies for that child is like positioning or when you want them to do it, that sort of thing. What we're actually working on at the moment is a more increased, different, I guess, not different, but a more improved version of the feedback loop that we're going to try and work on. So not just frequency and duration, but maybe repetitions. Maybe it's just a strategy. Maybe I want you to do this at 8 o'clock every morning, or maybe I want you to do this 4 o'clock every afternoon. So figuring out what are those motivators is, and how do we build those like you said, habits to help people, I guess, at the end of the day, become as independent as possible so they don't need therapy anymore. That's the goal.
So from a digital healthcare experience, I guess, the design of that experience, is Theratrak prescribing a methodology here where the therapist is in a session, is going through and starting to either choose from the database of the activities that are being recommended and prescribed to the participant, and kind of designing that particular program, but also being able to customize some of the programs. And you used a term before about your database. I didn't quite pick up on it, but just tell us a little bit more about it. Is that sort of is that media? Is that videos? Is it sort of imagery? What is that database?
Yeah, so the database at the moment, it's an activity database which is all text-based. So we have about 200 preloaded pediatric occupational therapy activities on the database. And those are what we call recipe cards. So what you need, what it works on, and how to do the task. And the idea is that the therapist will add rich media. So they'll add a photo, they'll add a video, they might add a PDF of that task so that they can prescribe to their client. And I guess one of the other cool things that we can do with Theratrak is every clinic or every organization that uses Theratrak can customize their organization's platform for themselves. So they can add on their own custom activity cards, they can add in their own personal media, they can add in their own personal videos, so that when their participants get their information, it's coming directly from them. So it's almost like a white labeled product, without all those extra bells and whistles. But it means that, you know, we have a therapist on our platform that's a craniosacral therapist. And for her, you know, her therapies are really bespoke and really individualized. And for her, a platform like this, where she can come on, build up a library and use all of her content and then prescribe it to her participants, then that makes it amazing for her, because it's something that she can create that's custom, but it's just for her. So she's creating this really rich library over time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's very cool. Yeah, it's very cool. I think that's key. So, in a sense, from a technical standpoint, you've sort of got enough content there that somebody could actually assemble it using the elements that are in Theratrak, but certainly cater for adding those unique or customized elements that is basically being determined by actually working with the participant and actually figuring out what's going to be the best fit for them, and also most likely to help support the motivation that's needed to actually work through it. Is that sort of a fair summary?
Yeah, and it's funny you say this. So yesterday I actually jumped on our platform. So I say we have 200 preloaded pediatric activities. I looked at the final count yesterday. I think we're almost up to 1,300. So there's over 1,000 that people have added themselves, created themselves, and that's what we want to build, is these libraries, because therapists have these amazing libraries of content that they've created over the years, but no way to digitally prescribe them to their participants. They just have to print out the handouts or store them in a Google Drive, or store them in a storage cupboard that they pay $500 a week for. I've heard every story. It's crazy.
Well, it's super smart because I guess over time what will happen is that repository will keep growing, and it'll be categorized in ways that the subscribers, the therapists, will be able to actually save even more time in need to actually put things together themselves. Is that sort of a plus that's emerging?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, my fingers and toes are crossed that the community over time will figure out how we can actually share all this data, because what I think one of the kind of the side note things of Theratrak that it can become is a training tool, and it can become a library where, you know, a therapist here in Australia can support a therapist in India, or a therapist in the US who might be a really key predominant occupational therapist or physio can support another therapist here in Australia, and create this online training tool. So that's my, you know, maybe if it'll work in the future. So if I put all these positive things out into the universe, hopefully someone will come back and say, yes, this is possible.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Look, if I can give you sort of my take on that, my experience, it's always good to have that kind of vision because you kind of inadvertently are leading towards it. But what tends to happen is you kind of move with your community of users over time, and I call it tech evolution at human speed. Because from a technology standpoint, we can build anything that you'd probably imagine to the extent that it's possible. But whether anybody actually needs it, values it, requires it is a different story altogether. And sometimes a lot of customers don't really know today that they do need it. And so there's no point trying to give them something that they're not even aware that they need right now. So it's kind of the human speed reference for me is always just as, we'll get there and we'll slow down. We just need everybody to sort of tell us when they're ready, what they actually need, and then kind of build it out, you know, at that point in time.
Totally.